There was a little boy named Johnny, and he went to school one day, and one of his friends came up to him and said, "Hey, Johnny, I learned something really cool. We can blackmail adults." And he said, all you have to do is walk up to an adult, your mom or dad, and say, "I know the whole truth." That's all you got to say. So Johnny went home, and he thought he'd try this out on his mom. So he went to his mom and said, "Mom, I know the whole truth." His mom quickly whipped out $20 and gave it to him and said, "Please don't tell your dad." So Johnny was pretty pleased about this, so he went off and he found his dad in the shed. And he went up to his dad and he said, "Dad, I know the whole truth." Well, his dad quickly grabbed $40 and gave it to Johnny and said, "But please don't tell your mom." Johnny was really pleased. I mean, $60. He's happy. So he goes a few days. And a few days later, he decides he wants to try it again. And so he's looking around, and he's at his house, and he sees the mailman coming to the door. So he goes up to the mailman, and he says, "I know the whole truth." And the mailman, he lights up, he gets a big smile on his face, he gets on a knee, stretches out his arms and says, "Well, then come and give your daddy a hug." Everyone has secrets. Even our family members have secrets. If you would trace your lineage all the way back, you would probably find some people that are less than good. I'm sure you've seen the classic Christmas movie, Home Alone. I mean, it's not really a dysfunctional family, but it's a huge family. And they go on Christmas vacation and they forget.
Kevin!
Home Alone.
Kevin, the little boy, their son, they leave him behind. The adventure continues and the family runs into obstacles trying to get back to their boy, and Kevin becomes Rambo against some home invaders. There are a couple truths that we have to realize about families. First off, families are good. Families are great. God created us to be in a family, to love each other, to encourage each other, to teach each other. That's what families are for. The second thing is that families are not perfect. They're not perfect. Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 18 is this most overlooked passage in the Christmas story. It's the genealogy of Jesus. Everyone loves reading Luke chapter 2 because Luke chapter 2 talks about the birth of Jesus and the little baby in the manger and the angel and the shepherds. But Matthew 1 is kind of boring. It starts with Abraham, Father Abraham. Yes, Jesus' family tree goes all the way back to Abraham. Check it out. As you can see, there are a lot of names here, lots of great relatives, but none as great as Jesus. If we could look into the lives of all these people, you'd see that there are a few people who are just a little less honorable, who are not that great. An interesting fact is that there's 42 generations here, and out of those 42 generations, only 5 women are mentioned. In Jesus' day, women were typically overlooked unless there was a scandal or an embarrassing moment that might embarrass the family, and then we hear about them. In Jesus' family tree, these 5 women either did terrible stuff or they were in the midst of terrible situations. But somehow, for some reason, God used all these messed up women to bring Jesus into the world. Let's look at the lives of these 5 women really quick. The story of Tamar goes like this. She married one of Judah's sons, and that son died. Well, back in those days, it was the responsibility of the next brother in line to step up and produce an heir for the brother that died. I mean, can you imagine that? Sorry your husband died and all, but guess what? You get to marry the little brother now. Woohoo! And that is the way things were. But after the marriage to the younger brother, that brother died, and then the next brother in line was just a kid. So Judah said that she was going to have to wait for his younger son to get old enough. So Tamar went away for a while, and a couple years go by, but Tamar really wanted a baby. And so she dressed up like a prostitute, and she seduced Judah and tricked him into, to getting pregnant. And so she got pregnant. And the crazy thing is, the baby turned out to be Jesus's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. Then there's a story of Rahab, mentioned in verse 5. The book of Joshua tells her story. You might have heard of her before. Rahab didn't just dress up like a prostitute. She was a prostitute. And when she found out that God's people were going to come and destroy the city she lived in, she began to put her trust in God. And it turned her life completely around. Her whole life was changed when she put her trust in the one true God. And she became Jesus' great, however many great-grandmother. Verse 5 also mentions a name you might be familiar with. It's the name Ruth. And Ruth was actually a pretty good person if you know the story, but she was a Moabite. She has a lineage that's kind of rough. The Moabites, they were known for incest and human sacrifice. Deuteronomy chapter 23 verse 3 actually says that if you have a child with a Moabite, then you would not be able to worship with God's people for 10 generations. These people were so bad that if your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents were Moabites, you wouldn't be able to come to church with me. And that is the family of Ruth. But Ruth was King David's grandmother, which makes her Jesus's great, however many great-grandmother. Then there's Bathsheba. You've heard that name before. Bathsheba, the rooftop bather that caused the King David to lust. She cheated on her husband with the king, and that affair ultimately caused the death of 4 of David's sons, and it created a huge civil war that killed thousands of people. It was a rough start, but she was the mother of King Solomon and right in the middle of the genealogy of Jesus. And now we have Mary, the mother of Jesus. Mary really was a great girl. You'd be hard-pressed to find anything wrong with Mary, but we have to realize that the Christmas story was a very scandalous one. I mean, a teenager gets pregnant without a husband, and that's more than just juicy gossip like it would be today. It was a criminal offense. What do you do? The crazy thing is, Mary, she wasn't in this situation because she was bad. She was actually in this situation because of how righteous she was. Okay, so Matthew chapter 1, it can be a bit boring. Or is it? I mean, there's some fantastic stories going on with these names. I mean, could you imagine the introduction that Jesus would have? I mean, he would say, "Hi, my name is Jesus. I come from a messed up family with messed up people who messed up a lot of things. I mean, my great, however many great-grandmother pretended she was a prostitute so she could seduce her father-in-law. And my great, however many great-grandmothers came from a long line of incest perverts and idol worshipers. And my great-grandparents had an affair and tried to cover it up, and it cost thousands of lives. And my own mother, she was accused of awful things, and she was called every name in the book. But guess what? God, my Father, still used each one of them. And he can still use you too." The Christmas story is surely the greatest story ever told. God coming to earth to make it possible for us to have a relationship with him. It's also the story of God telling you and me that no matter who you come from or no matter what you've done, that God can use you. Your story isn't done. Any of these people that we looked at today, they could have quit, they could have gave up, but they didn't. And God used messed up people from messed up families to fix messed up things. He uses crooked sticks to draw straight lines. That is how he can use me and he can use you. I hope you remember that this Christmas.